next topic study was the origin destination study for 47th Street. Again, the study limits were from the East Village limits at East Avenue to the West Village limits at Gilbert Avenue. The objectives of the study were to attempt to identify the primary users of the roadway, to try and quantify the volume of non-vehicle traffic, through traffic that's just cutting through the village and right to other destinations. And the last point there really is to provide some additional information that can be used to support any of the design changes that might ultimately be proposed for the roadway. The method of data collection for the OD study was through license plate surveys. We stationed people at various points in the village. In particular, we had people stationed at 47th Street and East Avenue, and we had people stationed at the west end on 47th and Gilbert Avenue. The attempt there is we're collecting license plates, as many as we can to try and get a sense of how many people are just traveling through the village and how many people are using 47th Street to get to other destinations in the village. And with a certain amount of manpower, we wanted to dedicate them to the most likely destinations within the village. And those are what are shown in yellow in here. So we also stationed people at Memorial Hospital, at the north and south campuses of Lyons Township High School, and at the 2 train stations. And lastly, because there could be through traffic cutting through the village that starts off on 47th Street or ends on 47th Street, but might use other roadways, such as LaGrange Road as the major north-south arterial. We also stationed people up at the north end on LaGrange Road at Ogden, and down at the south end of LaGrange Road at Plainfield Road. And we did our surveys. It was on a Wednesday back in September during the typical rush hours in the morning and the afternoon. Now, because of the volume of traffic on the roadway and the speeds of the traffic, it's not possible to collect the license plates of all cars, but we think we got a generous sample. On average, depending on the location, we were able to collect license plates for anywhere from 20 to 40% of the vehicles that were on the roadway. And where we stationed people in parking lots of those major destination points, we got 100% sampling of the cars were parked, so we were able to record all of those license plates. In order to be able to track movements of vehicles through the village, we need to be able to match cars from one location to another. Important point there. So we put the data that we collected, the license plate data, in the spreadsheet matching program and get senses of how many of those vehicles we could match at different points. And what we found, again, depending on the travel paths, was anywhere from 19 to 37% of the data that we collected we were able to match. So we would track their movements, either through traffic or traffic that entered 47th Street and went to some other destination within the village.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble following those. Can you just go back to the screen? How many vehicles traveled during those times, or how many vehicles did you track?
Well, we know how many vehicles are on the roadway over the course of the day. We had traffic counts previously collected as how many vehicles are on 47th Street or LaGrange Road in a 1 hour period during rush hours. So, and we know how many license plates we were able to collect at the various locations. So the point here was, of the traffic that was on the roadway at the times that we were out there, we were able to collect license plates that amounted to 28 to 40% of the traffic.
I understand that. If you go back a couple of screens where you had 13,000, 716,000, was that during these certain times?
No.
Or was that through the 24 hours?
That's a 24-hour count, much like we showed in the last study. That's just a 24-hour count for what 47th Street carries today.
Okay. And then the 1,100, the 2,900, and the key findings?
Oh, let me get, can I wait till we get to that slide?
Oh,
That's it, we have
okay.
that.
Sorry.
Can I ask another question on this slide? I'm unclear on why the range in the data matching between the sample size of 28 to 40% of the data matching from 19 to 37%. Either it matches or it doesn't? What am I missing?
Well, we collect data at many points east end, the west end, up on the Grange, south on the Grange.
Mhm.
At each of those points, we were able to match a different quantity of data. For the 28 to 40%, for instance, at one location we may have collected 28% of the vehicles that were at that point. Other locations as high as 40%.
I see.
So we could have averaged it out on average at all the points where we collected
But
data.
because you have a variety of collection destinations,
Right.
you can collect some data more than others.
Exactly. So we gave that range. And there's, like I said, we matched 19 to 37% of the data that we collected. The remaining of the data we were unable to match. We may have had license collected at one location, but we weren't able to match it at the other location. So there's an amount of traffic that we're uncertain. It's either local, it's through traffic, or it's some combination of the two.
I've got one more question on that, please. So is the 19 to 30%, 7% of the 28 to 40% or of the 100%?
It's up to 20 to 40%.
Okay.
The data that we collected.
So then the data matched is a significantly smaller portion of the 28 to 40% then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So when we look at the data that we were able to match, the 8 to 18% of traffic that was using 47th Street as a through route. They were entering on one end of the village and exiting at the other end. We were able to prove that 8 to 18% of the traffic that we collected was making that movement. And if you look at 8 to 18% of the volume of traffic that's on the roadway, that's about 1,100 to 2,900 vehicles that you could consider as through traffic. We were able to match, as I mentioned, another 11 to 19% that actually entered the village on 47th Street and parked at one of those major destination points. So we were able to determine 11 to 19% of the matched data was actually local traffic oriented to local destinations. They entered the village on 47 and they parked at the high school, they parked at the hospital, they parked at the train station. So we know that a fair degree of the traffic that's using 47th Street is local based. And if you look at the total volume on the roadway over a 24-hour period, that would amount to somewhere in that range that we know is local traffic. The difference is what we don't know. It could be local traffic, it could be through traffic. We know that a larger percentage is local-based traffic. We also did know we were only able to station people at the major destination points in the village. If we had the manpower, we could have stationed people at every smaller lot in the downtown area, or some other land uses around the village. And I think if we would have done that, we probably would have collected a higher matching of local-based traffic. Our sense is that, the last point here, that there's a much higher percentage of traffic that's using 47th Street that is local-based traffic than is strictly through traffic, more regional-based that's just cutting through the village. The data does show that more traffic is local than is non-local. But I think it's useful information just to try and quantify those matches that we could make and compare the data for the matches that we did make. Because ultimately, IDOT, our adjoining communities, they're going to want to have a sense as to who's using the roadway and who would benefit most from any changes in the design of the roadway. And I think our opinion from the study is that more local residents are using 47th Street, and the design of the roadway should be one that appeals best to the residents of the Grange first and foremost. Because again, going back to the previous design, as long as the roadway still functions at the same high levels of service, I think the case can be made for a reduction in the design of the roadway.
Mr. Russell,
Yeah.
given that it seems like we're finding that most of the traffic on 47th Street is local in nature, wouldn't those drivers be more prone to engage in cut-through traffic, as you were suggesting they probably wouldn't in the prior presentation?
Well, I guess it depends ultimately where their final destination is. If their final destination is somewhere in the adjoining neighborhood, would they get off the street, one street early? Maybe, yes. But again, we don't see the speeds being significantly different. We don't see the travel times being significantly different. So if it's a local trip and they're heading from one side of a Grange Road to the other, really don't see if there's any time saved. In fact, it would take more time to want to divert off onto a local street.
Thank you.
With that, I'm going to turn the podium over to Lilia Luna. He's going to talk a little bit about the study that looked at signalization of East Avenue.